I never thought I'd be the kind of woman telling this story. You know, the one where everything falls apart and you have to rebuild yourself from nothing. But here I am, and I need to tell you what happened, because maybe, just maybe, someone out there needs to hear that it's possible to rise from the ashes even when you think you've been burned beyond recognition. We met when I was 23, fresh out of college, full of dreams and so incredibly naive about love. Mark was everything I thought I wanted. Successful, charming, with that kind of confidence that makes you feel safe. When he walked into a room, people noticed. And for some reason, he noticed me. We dated for 2 years before he proposed on a beach in Greece. I can still remember the way the sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, and how he looked at me like I was the most precious thing in his world. I said yes before he even finished asking. Our wedding was beautiful, not extravagant, but perfect. My mother cried through the entire ceremony. My father shook Mark's hand and told him to take care of his little girl, and Mark promised he would. He promised in front of 200 people that he would love me, honor me, cherish me, for better or worse, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. I believed every single word. The first few years were good, really good. We bought a small house in the suburbs, nothing fancy, but it was ours. I'd spend weekends painting the walls while Mark worked on fixing the back deck. We'd order pizza and eat it sitting on the floor because we hadn't bought proper furniture yet, laughing about how we were playing house like kids. I worked as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized firm, and I was good at it. My boss had mentioned promotions, bigger projects, more responsibility, but then Mark's career really started taking off. He got promoted to senior executive at his firm. The money was incredible, but the hours were brutal. He'd leave before sunrise and come home after dark. I understood. I really did. This was his dream, and I wanted to support him. So when he said it would be easier if I stayed home, managed the house, made sure everything ran smoothly so he could focus on work, I agreed. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I could always go back to my career later. I quit my job. I threw myself into being the perfect wife. I learned to cook gourmet meals, even though I'd barely been able to boil pasta before. I kept the house spotless. I made sure his clothes were perfectly pressed. His favorite foods were always in the fridge. His coffee was ready exactly the way he liked it every morning. I organized his social calendar, bought gifts for his colleagues' wives, hosted dinner parties that his boss raved about for weeks. I became his support system, his comfort, his home base. And slowly, without even realizing it, I disappeared. My hobbies fell away. My friends stopped calling because I was always too busy with Mark's schedule. I stopped reading the books I loved. I stopped going to the gym. I stopped doing anything that was just for me. Everything became about him, about us, about the life we were building together. Except it wasn't really together anymore, was it? It was his life, and I was just there to make it run smoothly. 10 years passed like that. 10 years of waking up in the same bed, eating breakfast in the same kitchen, following the same routines. I was 35 years old, and I didn't even recognize myself anymore. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone tired, someone who'd gained weight, not because she enjoyed food, but because she ate her feelings late at night when her husband was still at the office. Someone whose eyes had lost their spark. But I told myself I was happy. I told myself this was what marriage was. You sacrifice, you compromise, you build a life together. And we had a good life, didn't we? The house was paid off. We had savings. We took nice vacations once a year, though Mark usually spent half the time on his laptop. This was what stability looked like. This was what commitment meant. Then came the changes. Small at first. So small I almost didn't notice. Mark started going to the gym at 5 in the morning. He'd always hated early mornings, but suddenly he was up before dawn, working out, coming home energized in a way I hadn't seen in years. He bought new clothes, expensive ones, fitted shirts that showed off his newly toned physique. He got a new haircut, started using cologne I'd never smelled before. He seemed younger somehow, more alive. I was happy for him. I really was. I thought maybe this was good for us. Maybe he was taking care of himself, trying to be healthier. I even suggested we work out together, that I could join him at the gym. He said it was his alone time, that he needed those early mornings to clear his head before the stress of work. I understood. I always understood. Then came the late nights. Later than before. He'd always worked long hours, But now he was coming home at midnight, 1 in the morning, sometimes not at all. Business trips became more frequent. Weekend conferences, client dinners that seemed to last all night. When I asked about them, he'd get irritated, snap at me, tell me I was being clingy, that I didn't understand the pressure he was under, that not everyone had the luxury of sitting at home all day. Sitting at home all day, that's what he called it. As if everything I did meant nothing. As if I hadn't given up my entire career, my independence, my identity to support his dreams. I started noticing the way he'd smile at his phone. Little smirks that he'd quickly hide when I walked into the room. The way he'd take calls in his car even when he was already home. How he'd started password protecting everything. His phone, his laptop, even his iPad. When I asked why, he said it was for work security, confidential client information. I believed him because what else could I do? Not trusting your husband. That's not what marriage is supposed to be about. But then there were the receipts. I wasn't snooping. Not really. I was just doing laundry, checking pockets before washing his pants, and I found a receipt from a restaurant downtown. An expensive place. The bill was for 2 people. Champagne, oysters, filet mignon. It was dated on a Tuesday night, a night when he'd told me he was working late at the office, that he'd just grabbed something quick at his desk. My hands shook as I held that piece of paper. There had to be an explanation. A client dinner he forgot to mention. A colleague's birthday celebration. I waited for him to come home that night, the receipt burning in my pocket. When he finally walked through the door after 11, I asked him casually how his day was. Fine, he said, busy, stressful. He'd worked through dinner, barely had time to eat, just some vending machine snacks. He looked right at me and lied, easily, like it was nothing. I didn't confront him, not then. I told myself I was being paranoid. Marriage goes through rough patches. This was probably nothing. I was probably overreacting because I'd been feeling so disconnected lately, so invisible. This was my problem, not his. But I couldn't stop myself from paying attention now. And once you start looking, you see everything. The way he'd angle his phone away from me, how he'd started showering immediately when he got home, even after he claimed to have been at the gym that morning. The strange charges on our credit card that he'd explain away with vague answers about work expenses. The perfume I'd smell on his shirts sometimes, floral and young, nothing like the classic scents I wore. I felt like I was going crazy. Part of me wanted to confront him, to demand the truth. But another part of me was terrified. Because what if my suspicions were right? What would I do then? Where would I go? I had no job, no recent work experience, no money of my own. Everything was in joint accounts that he managed. The house was in both our names, but I hadn't contributed financially in years. I was completely dependent on him, and the realization of that made me feel sick. 3 months of this. 3 months of lying awake at night while he slept peacefully beside me, wondering if I was losing my mind. 3 months of forced smiles and pretending everything was normal while my stomach churned with anxiety every time his phone buzzed. Then came the night that shattered everything. It was a Friday in October. I remember because the leaves were just starting to turn, and I'd spent the afternoon raking the yard, trying to keep busy, trying not to think about the distance between us that felt like an ocean now. Mark had said he'd be home for dinner, actually home for once. Maybe we could watch a movie, have a glass of wine, remember what it felt like to be connected. He called at 6 to say he'd be late, just an hour, he promised. A last-minute thing came up at work. I'd heard it so many times before. I reheated the dinner I'd made 3 times before finally eating alone at 9 o'clock, the food tasteless in my mouth. At 10:30 his phone rang on the kitchen counter. He'd left it at home. He never left his phone at home. It was like an extension of his hand. The screen lit up with the call, and I saw the name Emma, with a heart emoji. The phone rang, and I just stared at it, my whole body going cold. Emma. I didn't know any Emma. The call went to voicemail, and then immediately a text came through. The preview showed on the lock screen. Miss you already? Still thinking about this afternoon. Can't wait for tomorrow night. The room started spinning. I grabbed the counter to steady myself, my breath coming in short gasps. This afternoon, tomorrow night, miss you already, with a heart emoji next to her name. I picked up his phone with shaking hands. I tried his birthday as the passcode. Wrong. Our anniversary. Wrong. Then, with a sinking feeling, I tried a new combination, and it opened. He'd changed his passcode to something I wouldn't guess, but he'd also made a mistake. He'd left his phone at home. What I found in those next 30 minutes destroyed 10 years of my life. Messages going back months, hundreds of them. Emma was his assistant, 24 years old, fresh out of business school, beautiful, from the photos he'd saved, all long legs and perfect smile, and that kind of effortless youth that I'd lost somewhere along the way. The messages were explicit, detailed. They talked about hotel rooms and stolen afternoons and how careful they had to be. They made plans for a future together. He told her things he used to tell me, back when we first fell in love, called her baby sweetheart, the love of his life, said she made him feel young again, said being with her was like finally waking up after years of sleepwalking through life. And then I found the messages about me, about his boring, nagging, clingy wife who'd let herself go, about how I'd become so predictable, so dull, how coming home to me felt like a chore, how he was just waiting for the right time to leave. Once he figured out the finances, he was planning his exit strategy. I was a problem to be solved, an inconvenience to be managed. I vomited in the kitchen sink, actually physically sick, my whole body rejecting what I'd just learned. And then I just sat on the kitchen floor, my back against the cabinets, his phone in my hands, and I cried. I cried until there were no tears left, until my throat was raw, until my head pounded. He came home at midnight. I was still sitting on the floor. He walked in, saw me, saw his phone in my hands, and I watched his face change. Panic first, then calculation, then anger. He didn't apologize. He didn't beg for forgiveness. He got angry at me for invading his privacy, for going through his phone, for not trusting him. The audacity of it still takes my breath away. I'd just discovered my husband of 10 years was having an affair, and he was angry at me. We fought for hours. I screamed things I didn't know I was capable of saying. He said things that cut deeper than any knife could. He told me I'd become everything he didn't want in a wife, that I was suffocating him with my neediness, that I'd let myself go, that I was boring in bed, that talking to me was like watching paint dry. He said Emma made him feel alive in a way I never had, that she was exciting, ambitious, vibrant, everything I wasn't anymore. And the worst part of me believed him. Part of me thought maybe he was right, maybe I had become boring, maybe I had let myself go, maybe this was my fault for not being enough. He slept in the guest room that night, or maybe he didn't sleep at all. I don't know. I lay in our bed, in sheets that suddenly felt contaminated, and I stared at the ceiling until the sun came up. I felt hollowed out, empty, like someone had reached inside me and scooped out everything that made me human, leaving just a shell. The next morning, he told me he wanted a divorce. Just like that. No attempt to work things out, no suggestion of counseling. He'd already made up his mind. He'd probably made it up months ago. He was just waiting for the right moment, and I'd forced his hand by finding out. He moved out that week, didn't even pretend to feel guilty about it. He packed his things while I watched, and I remember thinking how practiced his movements were, like he'd been planning this for so long that he knew exactly what to take and what to leave behind. He took his clothes, his laptop, his golf clubs. He left behind the photos of us, the wedding album, all the accumulated evidence of our life together. The house felt enormous and empty after he left. Every room echoed. I'd walk from the bedroom to the kitchen, and my footsteps sounded too loud. I'd make coffee for one and cry because I'd automatically pulled out 2 mugs. I'd cook dinner and realize halfway through that I was making his favorite meal, the one with the rosemary chicken that he always said reminded him of his mother's cooking. The divorce proceedings were brutal. He had lawyers, expensive ones. I had a court-appointed attorney who was handling 12 other cases and barely remembered my name. Mark claimed that since I hadn't worked in 8 years, I'd contributed nothing to our assets. He fought me on everything. The house, the savings, even the furniture. His lawyers painted me as a gold digger, a lazy housewife who'd been living off his hard work while contributing nothing of value. I got the house, but only because I agreed to take on half the mortgage. He kept most of the savings, his 401k, his stock options. I got a small amount of alimony that would barely cover my property taxes and utilities. My lawyer said I was lucky to get that much, that I should be grateful for the scraps of a life I'd spent 10 years building. Emma moved in with him within a month. I know because my neighbor, sweet old Mrs. Patterson from across the street, felt she should tell me. She saw them together, loading boxes into his new apartment downtown. She said Emma looked young enough to be his daughter. She meant well, but every word felt like acid on an open wound. The first 3 months after he left were the darkest of my life. I didn't leave the house unless I absolutely had to. I ordered groceries online, I let the yard go wild. I stopped showering regularly because what was the point? There was no one to see me, no one to care. I'd wake up at 3 in the afternoon and realize I'd slept through another day. Then I'd stay up all night, wandering through the house like a ghost, remembering everything we'd been and trying to understand where it all went wrong. I gained more weight, 20 pounds in those 3 months. I ate ice cream for dinner and pizza for breakfast, and I didn't care. My clothes stopped fitting, but I just wore the same sweatpants every day, until they were threadbare. I stopped looking in mirrors because I couldn't stand what I saw. A woman in her mid-30s who looked 50. Hollow eyes, sallow skin, hair I hadn't bothered to brush in days. My mother called every week and I'd let it go to voicemail. My old friends reached out on Facebook and I'd read their messages and never respond. What would I say? That I'd been right all those years ago when I chose Mark over maintaining my friendships, that I'd put all my eggs in one basket and now the basket was broken and the eggs were just a ruined mess on the ground? I thought about ending it. I won't lie about that. There were nights when I stood in the bathroom with a bottle of sleeping pills, thinking how easy it would be to just stop feeling this pain, how peaceful it might be to just not exist anymore. I didn't want to die, exactly. I just wanted the hurt to stop. I wanted to stop feeling so worthless, so used up, so completely and utterly broken, but I never took those pills. Not because I was brave. I wasn't brave at all. I was a coward who couldn't even manage to end her own suffering. I'd just put the bottle back in the medicine cabinet and go back to bed and hope that tomorrow would somehow hurt less. It never did. 4 months after Mark left, I hit rock bottom. I was out of alimony money because I'd spent it all on takeout and bills I'd let pile up. The mortgage was due and I had $300 in my checking account. The electricity had been shut off twice. I was facing the very real possibility of losing the house, of being homeless, of having absolutely nothing left. I was sitting in the dark because I couldn't afford to pay the electric bill, eating cereal for dinner because it was all I had left in the house, when my phone rang. It was Sarah, my best friend from college. We hadn't spoken in 7 years because I'd been too busy being Mark's wife to maintain the friendship. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. She was in town for work and wanted to grab coffee, just like that. After 7 years of silence, she wanted to grab coffee. I said yes before I could think better of it. Probably because I was so desperately lonely that even the prospect of facing someone who knew the old me, the me before Mark, was better than sitting in the dark alone. We met the next day at a Starbucks downtown. I almost didn't recognize her. She looked amazing, confident, successful. She was wearing a beautiful suit and carrying a designer bag, and she had this energy about her, this vitality, everything I'd lost. She took one look at me and I saw the shock in her eyes. She tried to hide it, but I saw it. The woman sitting across from her looked nothing like the friend she'd known. I was wearing old jeans that didn't fit right, and a stained t-shirt, and I hadn't washed my hair in 4 days. I'm sure I looked exactly like what I was, a disaster. But Sarah didn't pity me. She didn't offer empty platitudes or tell me everything would be okay. She just bought me a coffee and asked me to tell her everything. So I did. And once I started talking, I couldn't stop. It all poured out. The affair, the divorce, the weight gain, the depression, the financial disaster I was facing, the absolute destruction of everything I'd thought my life would be. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that changed everything. She said, "You know what makes me saddest about all of this? That he made you forget who you were." I didn't understand at first, but she continued. She reminded me of the woman I used to be, ambitious, creative, full of ideas, the woman who'd graduated top of her marketing class, who'd landed a competitive job right out of college, who'd had plans to start her own consulting firm someday, who'd run a half marathon just because someone said she couldn't, who'd traveled solo through Europe the summer after graduation, who'd been fearless. I'd forgotten all of that. I'd let it disappear so completely that it felt like she was talking about someone else. But as she spoke, something stirred inside me, a tiny spark of something I thought had died. Anger, maybe, or determination, or just the stubborn refusal to let Mark win. Sarah told me about her life. She'd started her own digital marketing firm 6 years ago. It had been terrifying and hard, and she'd almost failed a dozen times, but she'd stuck with it, and now she had 15 employees and clients all over the country. She was successful, independent, happy, and then she said, "You could do this too. You were always better at the creative side than I was. You just forgot." I laughed, actually laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. Me, start a business? I couldn't even afford my electric bill. I hadn't worked in 8 years. I had no contacts, no portfolio, no credibility. I was a washed-up housewife with no skills and no prospects. But Sarah wouldn't let it go. She asked me what I had to lose. I was already at rock bottom. I was already facing the possibility of losing everything. What was the worst that could happen if I tried? That conversation planted a seed, a tiny, fragile seed of possibility. For the first time in months, I felt something other than despair. It was terrifying and exciting and completely overwhelming. But it was something. Sarah helped me put together a plan. She gave me some freelance work, small projects for her clients that I could do from home. Nothing major, social media content, blog posts, things I could handle while I was still barely functional. She paid me fairly, which was more than I deserved given the state I was in, but having something to do, something to focus on besides my own misery, it was like a lifeline. The work was hard at first. I'd forgotten how to think creatively. My brain felt sluggish, rusty from months of disuse. But slowly, gradually, I started to remember. A clever turn of phrase, a unique angle for a marketing campaign, the satisfaction of creating something good. I used that money to pay my mortgage, to buy real food, to turn the electricity back on. Small victories that felt enormous. And with each small victory, I felt a little bit stronger, but I still looked in the mirror and hated what I saw. I was still overweight, still exhausted all the time, still falling asleep crying most nights. The work helped, but it wasn't enough. I needed more. I needed to rebuild everything, not just my career. So I started walking, just around my neighborhood at first, 10 minutes a day, which was all I could manage without getting winded. It was humiliating. Mrs. Patterson would wave from her garden, and I knew she could see how out of shape I was, how far I'd fallen. But I kept doing it. 10 minutes became 15, then 20, then 30. I bought a pair of running shoes with some of my freelance money, started jogging even though I could barely make it to the end of the block before I had to stop and catch my breath. People would pass me, actual runners, and I felt their judgmental stares, or maybe I just imagined them. Either way, it hurt, but I kept going. Every single day, even when I didn't want to, especially when I didn't want to, because staying in bed meant giving up, and I decided I wasn't going to give up anymore. I started eating better, not dieting exactly, but just making healthier choices, cooking real meals instead of ordering takeout. It was hard because cooking for one felt so lonely, but I did it anyway. 6 months after Sarah's visit, I'd lost 15 pounds. I was taking on more freelance work and actually enjoying it. I was running 3 miles a day, small changes, but they felt monumental. For the first time since Mark left, I could see a path forward. It was rocky and uncertain and terrifying, but it existed. Then I saw them, Mark and Emma, at a restaurant downtown. I was meeting Sarah for lunch to discuss a potential big client she wanted to refer to me, and there they were at a table by the window. He had his hand over hers. They were laughing. She was so young, so beautiful, so effortlessly perfect, and he looked happy, genuinely, radiantly happy in a way he hadn't looked with me in years. It felt like being stabbed. All the progress I'd made, all the healing, it felt like it shattered in an instant. I couldn't breathe. Sarah saw my face, followed my gaze, understood immediately. She wanted to leave, to go somewhere else, but I made myself stay. I made myself sit at that restaurant and eat lunch and discuss business while my ex-husband and his young girlfriend sat 50 feet away. It hurt. God, it hurt. But it also did something else. It made me angry. Really, truly angry for the first time. Not sad, not depressed, not defeated. Angry. He got to move on so easily. He got to be happy while I was still struggling to put my life back together. He destroyed our marriage, destroyed me, and faced no consequences. He just got to ride off into the sunset with his pretty young girlfriend while I picked up the pieces alone. That anger became fuel. I channeled it into my work. I started pitching to bigger clients. I created a proper portfolio website. I invested in online courses to update my skills for the current digital landscape. I networked aggressively, reaching out to old contacts, making new ones, showing up at industry events, even when my anxiety screamed at me to stay home. I got rejected. A lot. Potential clients would look at my resume, see the 8-year gap, and politely decline. Or not so politely. One guy actually laughed and asked if I even knew what social media marketing was anymore. That hurt, but I used it. I let every rejection make me work harder, get better, prove them wrong. 8 months after that lunch where I saw them together, I landed my first major client, a medium-sized tech company that needed a complete digital marketing overhaul. The contract was for 6 months and paid more than I'd made in my last full year of freelancing. I cried when they signed the contract. Actually sat at my kitchen table and sobbed with relief and pride and sheer disbelief that this was actually happening. I threw everything I had into that project. I worked 12, 14-hour days. I learned new platforms, new strategies, new technologies. I made mistakes and fixed them. I had brilliant ideas and terrible ones. But the client was happy, really happy. So happy that when the 6 months ended, they renewed for another year and referred me to 3 other companies. Suddenly, I had more work than I could handle alone, so I did something that terrified me. I hired help. 2 freelancers at first, young marketers who were hungry and talented and reminded me of who I used to be. Then a virtual assistant to manage my calendar and client communications. Then a graphic designer. Before I knew it, I had a team. I was running a business, an actual successful business. 2 years after Mark left me thinking I was worthless and used up, I had built something real, something mine. The physical transformation kept happening too. I'd lost 45 pounds. I wasn't trying to get skinny. I was trying to get strong. I hired a personal trainer, a woman named Jess who pushed me harder than I'd ever been pushed. She taught me to lift weights, to push past my limits, to see my body as something powerful instead of something shameful. I started dressing better, not for anyone else, but for myself. I wanted to look professional, successful, put together. I got a good haircut, started wearing makeup again, not to hide, but to feel polished, confident. Every time I looked in the mirror now, I saw someone different, someone stronger. 3 years after the divorce, my business was thriving. I had 12 employees, an actual office space downtown, and a client roster that included some impressive names. I'd been featured in a local business magazine as one of the city's top emerging entrepreneurs. I'd paid off my mortgage. I'd bought a new car. I'd traveled to conferences in New York and Los Angeles and Austin. I was happy, actually genuinely happy, not the fake happiness I'd performed during my marriage, always trying to convince myself I had everything I wanted. Real happiness, the kind that comes from building a life on your own terms. I dated a little, nothing serious. A few nice dinners, some fun conversations, but I wasn't looking for a relationship. I didn't need one. I liked my independence. I liked being accountable only to myself. Maybe that would change someday, but I wasn't in a hurry. And Mark, I barely thought about him anymore. He'd become a character in a story about someone else's life. The betrayal didn't hurt like it used to. It was just a thing that had happened, a catalyst for change, but not the defining moment of my existence. I heard through the grapevine that things weren't going so well for him. His company had downsized and he'd been let go. Emma had left him for someone younger, richer. Karma, people said. I didn't take any pleasure in it. I didn't feel anything at all, really. His life had nothing to do with mine anymore. Then one day, my assistant told me someone named Mark was on the phone, asking to speak with me. My stomach clenched for just a moment before I remembered who I was now. I told her to put him through. His voice was different, smaller somehow. He asked how I was doing, made awkward small talk. Then he got to the point. He'd seen my company's success. He was impressed. He wondered if maybe since we'd known each other so long, I might consider hiring him. He had so much experience. He could really help take things to the next level. The audacity of it was almost funny. This man who'd called me boring, worthless, a drain on his life. This man who'd fought me for every penny in the divorce. This man who'd replaced me without a second thought. Now he was asking me for a job. I was quiet for a moment. Part of me wanted to rage at him, to remind him of every cruel thing he'd said, to make him feel even a fraction of the pain he'd caused me. But that's not who I was anymore. That woman who'd sat on her kitchen floor crying over his betrayal, she was gone. So I said, very calmly and professionally, that I appreciated his interest, but all our positions were currently filled. I wished him the best in his job search, and then I ended the call. No anger, no satisfaction, no emotion at all. Just a polite professional rejection, and that, I realized, was the best revenge I could have asked for. He didn't matter anymore. He had no power over me. He was just another person who'd asked for something I couldn't give. I thought that would be the end of it. But 2 weeks later, I got a message on LinkedIn. Emma, his ex-girlfriend. She'd heard about my company and was wondering if I had any openings. She had experience as an executive assistant and in project management. She included her resume. I looked at her profile picture. She was still beautiful, but she looked tired now. The bright, youthful energy I'd seen in her that day at the restaurant was gone. She looked like someone who'd learned that glitter isn't gold. I didn't respond. I didn't owe her anything. Not my time, not my energy, certainly not a job. I deleted the message and moved on with my day. But later that week, I saw them together, Mark and Emma. I was having coffee with a client at that same restaurant where I'd seen them years ago, the one where they'd looked so happy together. They were outside, arguing on the sidewalk. His face was red and angry. She was crying. It looked messy and painful and exactly like the kind of relationship built on betrayal deserved to look. My client asked if I knew them. I said no. And it was true. I didn't know those people. They were strangers. Their drama had nothing to do with me. That night I went home to my beautiful house. The same house I'd almost lost. The same house that had felt like a tomb when Mark left. But now it felt like mine. Really, truly mine. Every room reflected my taste, my style, my choices. There were no compromises, no accommodating someone else's preferences. It was exactly what I wanted it to be. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my back deck, looking at the garden I'd planted last spring. The sunset was painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. It was quiet, peaceful, perfect, and I realized something. Mark leaving me was the best thing that ever happened to me. I would never have chosen it. The pain was real and terrible, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but it forced me to remember who I was. It forced me to rebuild myself stronger, better, more authentic. The woman I was in, my marriage, she was a shadow, a supporting character in someone else's story. She'd forgotten how to dream, how to want things for herself, how to take up space in the world. She'd made herself small to make room for someone else's ego. But the woman I am now, she takes up space unapologetically. She knows her worth. She's built something meaningful with her own hands. She doesn't need anyone's validation or approval. She's complete on her own. If I could go back and tell that woman sitting on her kitchen floor 4 years ago, broken and crying and convinced her life was over, I would tell her this: you are not ending, you are beginning. The pain you feel right now, it's not going to kill you. It's going to forge you into someone stronger than you ever imagined possible. I would tell her that the man who made her feel worthless was wrong, that his opinion of her value said everything about him and nothing about her, that she was never boring or clingy or too much. She was just trying to love someone who wasn't capable of loving her back the way she deserved. I would tell her that being alone is not the same as being lonely, that independence is not the consolation prize after love fails. It's the foundation everything else should be built on, that a relationship should add to your life, not become your entire life. I would tell her that her worth is not determined by whether someone chooses to stay or go, that she is valuable because she exists, because she has things to offer the world, because she is capable of growth and change and fierce determination. I would tell her to be patient with herself, that healing isn't linear, that some days will be harder than others, that it's okay to still feel sad sometimes about what was lost, even while celebrating what was gained, that she contains multitudes and doesn't have to choose between grief and joy. She can hold both. I would tell her that revenge isn't about making someone hurt the way they hurt you. It's about living so well that their opinion of you becomes irrelevant. It's about succeeding so completely that you forget to care whether they notice. It's about building a life so fulfilling that running into them feels like a minor inconvenience rather than a catastrophe. Most importantly, I would tell her that she's going to make it, that 4 years from now she'll be sitting on her deck watching the sunset, and she'll be genuinely, authentically happy, not happy despite what happened, happy because of it, because the breaking down made room for the building up, because sometimes we have to lose everything to find out what we're really made of, but I can't go back and tell her those things. All I can do is live them. All I can do is be the proof that it gets better, that you can survive the unsurvivable, that you can rebuild from rubble, that you are never too old, too broken, too far gone to start again. To anyone listening to this who's going through something similar, who feels like their world has ended, who can't imagine how they'll survive this, you will. I promise you, you will. It won't be easy. There will be days when you want to give up, days when the pain feels too big to bear, days when you can't imagine ever feeling whole again, but keep going anyway. Wake up every day and do one thing that moves you forward, even if it's just getting out of bed, even if it's just taking a shower, even if it's just walking around the block. Every small step counts. Every tiny victory matters. Don't let someone else's rejection define you. Don't let their failure to see your value convince you that you have none. Don't shrink yourself to fit into someone else's limited vision of who you should be. You are so much more than their small mind could comprehend. Build something, create something, become something. Not to show them what they lost, although that's a nice side effect. Do it for yourself. Do it because you deserve to see what you're capable of. Do it because your life is yours and you only get one shot at it. And spending it diminished and defeated is a waste of your potential. And when you finally make it to the other side, when you've built yourself back up, when you're strong and successful and happy, and your ex comes crawling back asking for favors or second chances, you'll know exactly what to do. You'll say no, calmly, politely, firmly, and you won't feel anger or bitterness or even satisfaction. You'll feel nothing, because they'll be irrelevant. A footnote in your story, not the main chapter. That's real revenge, not hurting them back, just moving on so completely that they can't hurt you anymore, just succeeding so thoroughly that their validation or approval means nothing, just living so well that you forget they exist. I am not the same woman Mark left 4 years ago. That woman is gone. She had to die so I could be born. And I'm grateful. Grateful for the pain that taught me strength. Grateful for the betrayal that taught me self-reliance. Grateful for the ending that forced a new beginning. So thank you, Mark. Thank you for showing me exactly who you were. Thank you for leaving before I wasted any more of my life on you. Thank you for underestimating me. Your rejection was the greatest gift you could have given me, even if you didn't mean it that way. I won. Not because I hurt you back. Not because I took anything from you. I won because I took back myself. And that's something you can never touch.